One by one, employees from the tourism sector show up here at the National Insurance Board seeking financial assistance.
Wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, except that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you'd better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. There's no telling who that it's naming, for the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing.
Welcome to The New Economy, What's Next? My guest today is Mark Roderick, the premier, I'll say it, the best crowdfunding lawyer in the world. So we're about to have a really great conversation about the space and the new some of the new things that are coming on in crowdfunding. So stay tuned. In the old economy, financial services added value by creating financial products that allowed people to move money offshore to reduce taxes and hide money, for many reasons, good and bad. Our regulatory philosophy and regulations enabled this. This has had two unintended consequences. Number one, because money laundering is a constant worry in this system, the regulatory assumption has to be that the client and/or institution is a bad actor. This means that the KYC, due diligence, and compliance requirements are really costly and time-consuming. Number two, the second consequence is that we've been in a constant battle with the OECD. It seems like no matter what we do, we are under constant threat of blacklisting. This is because source of funds has to be discovered. Ultimately, the world has decided that this form of financial services is unacceptable. But the world has changed in other ways too. Financial technology allows us to reach out across borders. In the new economy, financial services is about enabling companies of all sizes to create value and thousands of jobs. People and businesses always need money. There will always be more people and money outside of the Bahamas. Where the Bahamas can win big is by transforming itself to a fintech hub with progressive and collaborative regulators. We are ideally located, stable, and beautiful. FDI would flood into this place and all of our lives. That's locals, expats, our guests, black, white, rich, middle class, and poor, private sector, and government would be better off. This, however, requires a different regulatory philosophy, one that would drastically speed up KYC, due diligence, and compliance, because money coming in is from legitimate places. This money is being put to work in businesses that create jobs and build community. The second great thing about job-creating fintech is that it would permanently take us off of the OECD blacklists, improve our ability to trade with the world, and ultimately give opportunity to all Bahamians and our guests. The new economy is here. We have to be brave enough to make the jump. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Roderick. How are you doing?
Well, I am doing even better than I was before after that wonderful, flattering introduction. So I'll try to make your viewers, I'll try to live up to that introduction if I can. But I'm doing fine. It's a strange new world we're all living in. But so far, so good.
Okay. Why don't you start by you're a crowdfunding lawyer in the
Yep.
United States. And why don't you start? How did you get into that?
Well, that's a great question. So I always say I've been practicing law since 1840, and I've always represented entrepreneurs and their businesses in all kinds of fields, tech and all kinds of other fields. And one of the things you do when you represent entrepreneurs is help them raise money because, of course, we live in a capitalist system. So capital is the lifeblood of all businesses, large and small. So I spent a lot of my time helping entrepreneurs raise capital under the old rules, and was therefore, very aware of the impediments and all the issues and time spent under the old capital raising rules. So when we got this thing called the Jobs Act was signed into law by President Obama on May 5th, 2012, and I said, wow, this is going to be transformative and disruptive in a very wonderful way. And I want to be involved in that. That's going to be exciting and fun and really transformative. So that's what I started to do. And it has indeed lived up in most respects to all of my expectations and then some.
Oh, yes.
And it's about to explode for reasons that we'll get into later. So anyway, that's how I got into this wonderful space. It's really a continuation of helping entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I think with the introduction of the Jobs Act, we're finally at the nexus of regulation, technology, and people's general understanding of the internet as a tool for.
What it is, what I thought you were going to say, you were just about there. It's sort of the intersection of all those things that you said, plus social media.
Yes.
That's what crowdfunding is. It's that intersection, old-fashioned finance and technology and social media. Put those three things together. As I often say, fortunately, there are a lot of complicated legal rules involved with crowdfunding because otherwise, why would anyone hire me? But it is actually very simple, and this is really the point. It's just the internet. We use the internet for everything. People of your generation can't imagine a world without the internet.
For clarification, I know I'm young, but I do remember a time before with dial-up internet. So I'm not. I was like 10 years old when the dial-up went out of style. So I still remember that. Okay.
Well, I remember black and white TV. So but anyway, we do everything on the internet. Here we are. Right?
Yeah.
We're having a meeting. We're having a meeting across continents. But we find spouses on the internet. We do everything. So why not be able to raise money using the internet? It was an obvious thing that really was going to happen. And that's what crowdfunding is. It's just using the internet to raise capital. So when you say it that way and forget for a moment all the complicated legal rules, that gives you a sense both why we have it and its potential, what its potential is. Look at Amazon, right? Look at the internet, look at Google, whatever. But that's the potential for crowdfunding. Yes, we're going to use the internet to raise capital.
Yeah, and it's in many ways it's really bringing capital down to the average entrepreneur. Like anyone that's tried to raise money through the old school finance knows how difficult it is. Even just to get a meeting with some of these guys is very difficult. But crowdfunding kind of allows so much more participation that it's creating new opportunities for people. And I know you guys are seeing that in the United States.
Well, yes, we are. So it's funny you should say, like, it's hard to get a meeting with those guys because one of the origins, the real origin story of crowdfunding is there was this group of real estate developers, and they, like everyone else, they would trek up to New York and bend their knee to the private equity guys to try to get meetings and try to get financed. And one day on the Acela, on the way back from New York, they said, and I won't repeat the expletive, but they said, there has to be a better way. And that's what crowdfunding is, because, the old system was if you step back and forget that it's finance, it was an industry, a fragmented industry based on inefficiency and private networks, right? When you say get a meeting with those guys, well, first you had to even know those guys existed. And how did you find that out?
Yeah.
Very inefficient, opaque. Whom do you know? Whom does your father know? Whom does your mother know? Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Mountain View, California, or did you grow up in South Dakota? Or did you grow up outside the United States? And all those factors had a effect on your access to capital. But what does the internet do? I mean, the internet always, no matter the industry, connects buyers and sellers directly, right? Whether it's selling books or anything else. And it eliminates middlemen. And all those guys that you're referencing, the private equity guys, they are middlemen. It's not their money, right? They go out and form limited partnerships. Those are the investors, but those middlemen stand between you, the entrepreneur, and those investors. If you think about Manhattan, the entire space, all that office space between the East River and the Hudson, it's all middlemen.
Think direct ownership of the Bahamian pie isn't for you? Think again. At Arawak X, we believe in the ingenuity of the Bahamian people. These times are uncertain and unprecedented, but we know that in every crisis there is an opportunity to add value to people's lives. To this, we understand that new businesses will be formed and old ideas whose time has finally come will be realized. We see this in industries long been ignored by traditional financial services and by society at large, particularly in our digital businesses, agribusiness, fishing, manufacturing, and even new touristic ventures. Due to our present circumstances, these businesses have finally been brought to the forefront. Arawak X seeks to give your ideas and your participation a means of making your financial dreams a reality. We give businesses and investors tools needed to finance them. Business is a complicated thing, with many moving and changing parts that often require multidisciplinary teams to turn ideas into reality. While no one can truly say which businesses will make it and thrive and which will not, there are certain formulaic traits that successful businesses have. This is why we here at Arawak X place such a high emphasis on corporate governance and the structure it brings to give companies the best chance at growth and expansion. Arawak X operates a regulated and financially inclusive platform that combines modern technology with best practices and a world-class team to bring together businesses and investors at every level, allowing wider participation in ownership of companies. So here's how it works. Investors, both foreign and local, individual and institutional, can view offerings and directly invest into these companies. We have spent several years and invested greatly in our staff and technology processes. We are doing this by greatly expanding the ease of investment. In other words, people will be able to participate in promising new ventures for as little as $50. The ethos of our institution is that of financial inclusion. And in this spirit, we ourselves will be a publicly traded company. In these next few months, as we roll out our platform, know that we view ourselves as an integral part of a wider societal change, the change that brings ownership, opportunity to everyone. We are pleased to work with our partners in industry, government, civil society, and the people in making the Bahamas the best little nation on this planet. As a first step, we have put together a free online course, the Intelligent Bahamian Investor Masterclass, that will give you some of the basics to investing. This can be found at invest242.com. Arawak X, dream bigger. I've been blessed to grow up in a business family. The most important thing I've learned from them was to listen to experts' stories. Learn from their successes, try to avoid their mistakes, and copy best practices. In the New Economy TV show, we are bringing innovative experts that are growth-focused. This show is for entrepreneurs, business leaders, and policymakers. Join me and my guests every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. on our TV. The New Economy. What's next?
That's what it is. And the internet, I know I'm going off into a speech here, but the internet allows the entrepreneurs and the investors to connect with one another without those middlemen. Because that's always what the internet does. So, I mean, that's why it's so powerful.
It's powerful.
It's just incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
So now, instead of, you're looking for money, rather than trying to get a meeting with those guys, you can put up a website and theoretically connect with every investor in the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, every investor in the world. That's powerful.
Mm-hmm. And what's great is our regulatory authorities have recognized the power of this and have taken the bold step of regulating it, instead of pretending like it doesn't exist and we should shun it or criminalize it, but instead to regulate it and harness it. And so, we'll stay away from the technicality of the rules just to stay, at a 30,000 square foot level. But there's some really innovative liberalizations that are coming down from regulation.
Yeah, our Securities and Exchange Commission, if I had a hat on right now, I would take it off to the SEC. They have been extraordinarily receptive to crowdfunding. Mm-hmm. They're about to improve crowdfunding in a very significant way. But the great story, I think, that epitomizes it is in April, we're in the middle of this COVID pandemic, mm-hmm. and the SEC is responsible for policing, a multi-trillion-dollar capital market. Mm-hmm. And in April, they come out with emergency crowdfunding rules to make it a little easier to do crowdfunding from April through August. I bet those get extended, the pandemic. Yeah. But just the fact that they allocated the staff resources to do that shows that, the SEC is really on board. They think crowdfunding has an important role to play generally, but in helping the American economy recover from the pandemic specifically. So it's absolutely fabulous.
Us on the outside of the U.S., when we look at the American financial system, we're in awe and amazement at how because ultimately it's the entrepreneurs and the business owners that are helped by these regulations and rules. And so we're, like I said, we look with deep admiration for the innovative ability of these regulatory bodies to do that thing. Our regulators are good. They're working, they like the idea of crowdfunding, and they're working towards it, and we're working with them. But it's nice to see that our neighbor to the north leading the way, because it makes it easier for us to charge in behind. Great. Let's switching tacks a little bit, because crowdfunding is here and it's only going to grow with time. What opportunities do you see in the ecosystem, supporting these crowdfunding? What places can the innovative entrepreneur add value to the system and make sure that the whole ecosystem is working?
Well, I hate to say this because of all the hype around blockchain, but there are some very important aspects of the crowdfunding rules that are like custom made for a blockchain solution. One of them being, in some aspects of crowdfunding, it's important to know whether the investor is accredited. Okay, and that you probably know, I'm sure you do, but maybe some of your listeners don't. That means, in general, if we're talking about human beings, someone with income of 200,000 US dollars alone, or 300,000 with a spouse, or a net worth of $1 million US dollars without taking your house into account. So it means a more well-off individual. It used to mean wealthy, because those numbers have not changed since 1982. But today it means more well-off. But anyway, so in some aspects of crowdfunding, it matters if you're accredited. And a blockchain solution that could, provide an immutable record of whether Mark Roderick is accredited would be very, very useful. I mean, it would just eliminate a lot of friction. As it is now, you have to most people get a letter from their accountant. Yes, Mark Roderick is accredited, which of course is, those letters. And I'm not saying this happens a lot, but they can be forged. It's a weakness, and it's a friction point. So that would be a terrific, to be able to validate, yes, Mark Roderick is accredited across all platforms. That would really be very useful. Similarly, in Title III crowdfunding, there are limits about how much you can invest based on your income and net worth. And those limits apply not just for a specific investment, but they apply across all the investments you've made during the last year. Right now, there is, the platforms ask, well, how many investments have you made? And you can lie. I mean, it's a worthless piece of information right now. But if you could keep track of that, if there were an immutable record that people could tap into, boom, that makes the whole process much easier. So those are a couple ways. There's
also in terms of analytics, there's all of this new data needs to be, of course, analyzed.
Yes.
Where do you go to read of what makes a good company and what doesn't? What if you go on Wall Street, you can read the analysis by this company or that company. This there's credit ratings. There's all kinds of things that can.
Yes, data-driven due diligence.
That's right.
Is something that I have been looking for to emerge since crowdfunding began. Some kind of analytics to distinguish companies more than who has the best Facebook advertisement. There has to be at least some elementary data points that give investors some indication. Right now, the industry is kind of crying out for that. There are, if you're asking about opportunities, payment processing. I mean, payment processing across the entire world economy is the subject of a lot of investment, but payment processing is a mess. I decide I want to invest $5,000 in this company. How does that money get there? And right now, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's disjointed.
It is disjointed and inefficient and expensive, and that shouldn't happen. The way information is presented to investors right now is like archaic. It's one of my, as a lawyer, because I prepare the documents that investors are supposed to look at. We are like living in 1991 technology. You know how it's presented now? The investor is doing this on his iPad and suddenly gets an 87-page PDF. Right?
Yeah.
That's it. read this. Oh, okay. And scroll down to the bottom 5 seconds later and sign saying you have read and understand the entire thing. It's absurd. With today's technology, there have to be better ways to present information. So those are a few opportunities.
Yeah, I don't think it's like those terms of conditions on a website. I mean, let's be honest, who reads those?
Nobody.
But they're important. They're really important. They come back.
Yes, they are.
So where do you see the future of the world going? And of course.
Well, it's a lot of fun these days to talk about what the effect of the COVID pandemic is going to be. And I have my insight, the value of my incredible insight, plus $2.25 gets you on the New York subway. I will say that. You add those two things together, you can get on the subway. It is going to really be a big effect. I know, my church, I happen to be a Quaker, and our Quaker church, which is called a meeting, we've, like all churches, have been meeting virtually and on Zoom, and it's a surprisingly nice experience. And, this is just one example of thousands, but then you say, well, wait a second, if we can have church by Zoom, then that means that people who live in California or Mexico or Russia, why can't they be part of our church? I mean, once you cut the string of the geography, and that you can reimagine the world being a very different place, once geography doesn't matter. And that, who knows where that is going to go, but it could have enormous repercussions then like country borders, state borders are just geography and suddenly they don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a huge thought, and I'm sure there's people listening to this that their minds are churning of where they can take that, because you can take that in almost every direction. I mean,
yeah, you can. It applies to everything. I know one tiny, minuscule, unimportant example, the conference industry. I'm sure you in business, I in business, you go to conferences, I speak at a lot of conferences. Well, now I'm doing online conferences. And once you do them, you say, wow, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to get on an airplane. I didn't have to book a hotel reservation. I didn't have to spend all that time. I remember I lived just outside Philadelphia and was going to a conference in Los Angeles, and my flight was delayed, 12 hours. So I flew all night and blah, blah. It was awful. And so, wow, now we can do conferences. So
wonderful. Any final words for aspiring entrepreneurs and people who might be watching?
Well, the final word I will say is I've alluded a couple times to two different things. One, there's 3 different kinds of crowdfunding. The new one, this is what we call Title III crowdfunding, Regulation CF. This has been sort of a backwater since it came on the scene in 2016, because there's a lot of low limits, regulatory hurdles. The other thing I was talking about is the changes that are about to be made. Well, those changes are to Title III, and they are about to make Title III. They're raising the limit from $1 million to $5 million, making some other changes, but they're going to make the market for Title III much, much, much more vibrant. This is the time, because of these changes, to be getting into the Title III crowdfunding market. And I will tell you personally that, as well as your listeners, this is the time. So we're about to see an explosion in the Title III crowdfunding market. And if you want to be a part of it, this is a great time.
Wonderful.
I look outside my window.
So thanks so much.
So that was Mark
and
Roderick from
nothing
Lex
seems
Nova
to
Law.
say.
We'll see you next time.
I